Welcome to Bourbon, Beer, and Books. This is a spin-off of the Literally podcast by Case Johnston, who is on the show tonight. Banyan Family has a bevy of podcasts, including Van Sessions, a live studio audience podcast where, yes, musicians play just right outside a van. They used to play in the van, but pandemic. You can find all the Banyan Collective podcasts on YouTube or your favorite podcast app by simply searching Banyan. That's Banyan. There's two A's in Banyan. Bourbon, Beer, and Books has been launched for the past year, Sean?
Yeah, it's been a year, according to Facebook memories.
All right. My favorite part of Facebook that I have no part of anymore because I lost my old Facebook account. A bunch of friends from across the country, literally across the country, from Buffalo, New York to Florida and Utah and the Pacific Northwest. And then, Ben, where are you?
I'm in Minnesota.
See, Minnesota even. So talk about our favorite books while drinking bourbon and beer. Sometimes we don't even talk about books. Sometimes we don't drink bourbon or beer and we just have a good time. So today we do have Sean from Oregon. Case and myself are in Ogden, and then Ben's in Minnesota. So Sean, this is your guest. Why don't you go ahead and do the introduction here?
Oh, he's a friend of ours, and I call him a friend. We don't talk like every week or every month or so, but I'm so excited to see all this great stuff that he's doing. So I know Ben told us not to read his whole bio because it is long and he's doing so many things and it might be a little embarrassing, but I want to show you. I mean, this guy is just killing it right now. So he wrote 6 novels. The most recent among them is The Unfamiliar Garden and the Nth Metal. I've read both of them, and that's for the Comet Cycle series. Do I have that right, Ben?
Yeah, that's part of the Comet Cycle.
So you also wrote Deadlands, and I love that one because it's a dystopian retelling of the Lewis and Clark expedition in a way. And I just moving to Astoria, so I was really excited. I love that. Red Moon, The Wilding. I love The Wilding because I don't want to say I identified with that combat veteran because he's horrible, but I love how you wrote him at least. And then the short story Suicide Woods. Refresh, and The Language of the Elk. I have all of those books except for Suicide Woods and Language of the Elks. I got to get those. So you broke into comics in 2014 with a 2-issue Batman story, and I did buy that, and I loved it because the bad guy was Mike Magnuson, or at least Magnuson, right?
Our old mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were on Nightwing and the Teen Titans, but I was buying your stories when you were Green Arrow and James Bond, and I love it. It's just like I didn't know James Bond even had comics, but I guess you have to start somewhere, right? And so now you're doing Wolverine, you're doing X-Force, and Marvel Comics is trusting you with Ghost Rider 50th anniversary #1 comic. And that just blows me away. That's just amazing.
I'm having fun.
But I also want to talk into your podcast where you're doing the audio drama. It's kind of like the radio theater, which I love so much. So you did The Long Night. It's like for 15 podcasts, and that won the iHeart Radio Award for Best Scripted Podcast 2018.
Oh, congrats!
Then
That's awesome.
Wastelanders with Old Man Star-Lord, which. That's to me, that's such an interesting angle to go, an Old Man Star-Lord type of deal. I think that's great. And and I was like, holy cow, you got Chris Elliott and Danny Glover, too, like really cool actors in there. And that's got to be amazing, right?
Yeah, it was really fun being able to sit in on all those recording sessions. And
you got to sit in on them, man. That'd be so right.
Well, sit in as in set, I was on Zoom.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't get to hang out and like hoist beers in person, but it was.
We do it everything nowadays.
To be able to interact with them.
So now you're writing scripts for Paramount, Fox, Sony, Starz, and you have several films and TV projects. And we only have like 4 people that watch this, so you can probably tell us all of the stuff that you do. No one's gonna care.
Forget the NDAs. I can let it all spill out here.
No, but we should mention that people who are watching the live, if you'd like to ask Ben any questions, go ahead and type those in the YouTube or Facebook groups, and we'll see these pop up, and we can answer those live. So Ben is available for some questions. We can attend to those. All right, continue, Sean.
Well, I wanted to start out with a question, then Case will come with a question. And I already talked about like you were writing James Bond and Nightwing, Teen Titans, and Green Arrow. But you also wrote all those books and you're writing the scripts. I don't know if you're doing any stage plays, but the radio theater is kind of like that. My question is, do you have schizophrenia? No, I mean, like when you hit each one of those types of mediums, isn't it difficult? Or do you have to switch, or are you telling all the stories in the same way?
Sometimes my brain does feel like it's being torn to confetti. I'm able to compartmentalize pretty well by, breaking up my days and breaking up my weeks in such a way where I'll say be working on the novel from 8 to noon every day. And then I have like a continuous sort of flow from day to day to day, keeping that novel in my head. But then after lunch each day, I snarf down a Reuben sandwich, I walk the dog. As I'm doing so, I'm thinking about what I'm going to hit at the desk when I return. So I get back to the desk and I'm not working on the novel anymore. Maybe I'm punching out some comic scripts. Maybe I'm editing a screenplay. Maybe I'm working on a podcast, whatever. In other words, I develop a schedule for myself and I try to sustain what I guess you could call a kind of cascading focus. But I would not, advocate like spreading yourself too thin. I'm probably working on too many projects right now, but it's hard to say no when these opportunities rise up. The thing is that all of them offer unique challenges. And I don't just mean the stories themselves and whatever plot point I'm wrestling with. I mean, the craft. The craft is so different from medium to medium, right? Like here I am writing comics, and then here I am writing novels, and then here I am writing for audio. Think about audio for a second. When I started writing Wolverine: The Long Night, which is the first of the 3 podcast series that I wrote, when I first started writing that, I realized that I was translating a visual medium, comics, into the audio realm, right? This is a story about Wolverine. This is a story that kicked off what I guess you could call the Marvel audio universe. How was I to take, this visual medium and make it digestible or sort of congruent with your ears instead of your eyes? Let me give you an example of that. What's sort of the hallmark of every comics issue or any comic book movie? The fight scene. How the hell do you write a fight scene that makes any sort of sense if your audience is just listening to it, right? If you've got people going, snitch,
That was pretty good, though. That was pretty good. I was into it.
I was going to say good sound effects. I don't know.
So, you have to negotiate that.
Uh-huh.
One thing that I figured out was that if you read, studying the form, right? I was listening to Serial. I was listening to S-Town. I was listening to all these series that were popular at the time, the majority of which were true crime shows, and they basically all had an interrogative format, meaning there was a journalist at the center of it asking questions of people. Those people would then recall a story, and the story would then sort of take over the narrative. The past would intrude upon the present. And so,
like Max Brooks' World War Z, maybe?
Yeah, in a way.
In a way, tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bunch of oral history, sure. So in my case, I imagined all of these different federal agents. They moved into this town in Alaska, and they were there to figure out who a killer was. And so they're interviewing people. They're interviewing a fisherman. They're interviewing a bartender. They're interviewing deputies, the sheriff, somebody who owns an apartment building, blah, 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 blah. They're interviewing these people. And as this interrogation continues, right, the crab boat guy might be like, well, I woke up at 4 a.m. that night, and went down to the docks, and, pulled out the vessel, went out into the chop, and fog was rolling in, and it makes sense that they would be telling you all this expository detail.
Yeah.
Because it's the result of them being asked a question, as opposed to, right, I don't know, two people walking along and being like, here we are walking along this fine avenue named Bear Brook Lane, and up ahead 20 yards or so is the old Withers home, where on this day, they say, 20 years ago, old man Withers hacked up his wife with an axe. And lo, do you not hear now the noise of creaking floorboards just beyond the threshold? Right? That's corny as shit. And so by having this interrogation going on, then I could get the exposition out, but I could also set the stage. Like, okay, we know that it's foggy. We know it's night. We know the exact location. And then we'd have these ambient details start to flow forward. Like you'd hear the waves slapping. You'd hear the boat rigging creak. You'd hear the squeak of like rubber boots on a deck. You'd hear the hinge of the hold squeak as it rose up, and somebody clicked a flashlight and looked down, and among the fish and the ice, there was also a body, right? And so that's how we did it. We went sort of like this back and forth negotiation between the past and the present that allowed you to not give a visualization, but as close to a lived experience as possible.
And I think I saw that one of your podcasts, or no, I'm sorry, one of your craft talks, as far as like the butler and the maid talking and giving exposition as opposed to like, you know, writing it.
Yeah, I mean, exposition is clunky as hell to work into dialogue. So how do you come up with a way to sort of trick it into the script? And that was the trick that I came up with, which I only figured out by studying all of these nonfiction podcasts.
Yeah.
Cool. That's amazing. I don't know how much Sean wants me to follow script. I'm not that good at it. And I might have missed something when you're going over everything you've been doing lately. Where was the part where you said you missed grading English composition papers?
Hey, I taught. I taught for a while. I taught for over 10 years, and I'm glad I did it. It made me feel like I was earning my oxygen being in the classroom, whether I was teaching composition or whether I was teaching lit or creative writing or whatever. I'm glad for that experience, and I still try to get into the classroom every now and then. I try to teach at summer programs and such, writers conferences like Tin House or Bread Loaf or Sewanee or wherever. And there's something infectious about being around.
Hope you cut it.
What was that? Did I cut out? There's something great about just being around other people who really care about language, other people who really worship at the same altar built of these 26 letters that we all cherish, and sometimes that doesn't happen in a composition classroom for sure.
Yeah. Well, I remember you putting on Facebook the day you said, as of right now, and I don't know where my future is going to take me, but I'm now no longer teaching, at least full time. And I remember, I mean, you could see it within your prose just on a Facebook post that there was, there was a bit of hesitance, of course, because you'd been in the classroom so long. And like Sean said earlier, it's so cool that, we have yet to see that Facebook post where you're like, I have to go back into the classroom. So I think it's pretty awesome that was a long time. And I remember reading that specifically, cheering from out here. I don't actually know where I was living. I think I was still up in Washington at the time, but that's all. I think that's just awesome that post. I just remember it very, very, very specifically.
It's been about 10 years since I quit, and I don't every day I'm grateful for what I'm doing. I don't take it for granted in the slightest. And if I have to go back to teaching, there'll be no complaints from me. It's a great gig. Well,
congrats. I've just been a while, and I remember just reading that post very specifically. Sean. So I finished The Ghostwriter, which I thought which was great. And my question is, and you talked about different mediums and how they're different art forms, and I would love to know that the kind of process? I mean, obviously it's completely different than writing a novel or working with an editor on a novel. I mean, because you have, how many words do you have in like in a ghostwriter or within a comic book totally from start to finish?
Well, generally speaking, there's some flexibility on this because like a first issue might be oversized. But generally speaking, if you're writing for DC or Marvel, you've got a 20-page issue, and there's 20 pages, there's 5 to 7 scenes, there's other things that I can get into, but you know, it's 20 pages, and it reads panel by panel a little bit like a movie script. You know, it's like think of it like a slow movie, where maybe the direction is a little bit more aggressive than you'd find in a screenplay, and that, you know, you're talking to the artist directly about sometimes, you know, the angle of a shot, or whether it's close up or medium or whatever else.
Is there a lot of that back and forth in the writing phase, between you and the artist, or is that something you come together beforehand, or is it something that you write it out, the artist reads it, and then you guys kind of like work together after that?
So it depends on the situation. In the case of, let's say, Wolverine, you know, I'm working with legendary artist Adam Kubert. So I will oftentimes talk to Adam beforehand about a story arc that I have in mind. I'm like, okay, I want to write this story arc about an auction house that specializes in black market superhero and supervillain stuff from the Marvel universe. We're going to call this place Legacy House. And Wolverine's going to be basically a noir detective in the storyline, investigating something about his own past and his connection to T-Max and Maverick. But he's also going to be breaking into like this underworld, this black auction underworld. And that auction house, right, it's all about the past as well. So those two things are thematically tied together. So I might talk to Adam about something like that up front, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. Hey, I wonder if in every one of these interrogations that's going to occur, because what I have is a series of interrogations where Wolverine is like, as I said, acting as a detective. So he's like slamming some guy against a wall and being like, what happened here? And then he's going someplace else and, you know, smashing somebody else against the wall and saying, what happened here? And in every one of those cases, you're getting a story, and the story seeps into the past, sort of like what I was talking about with The Long Night. And so Adam comes up with he's like, you know what, I think would be cool? What if we had a different layout scheme? And what if we had a different color scheme? And what if we had a different just art dynamic for every one of those stories that was influenced by that person? So let's say it's this one guy who's sort of a pirate from a fantasy realm called Araco. Let's make that look like almost like a old Conan comic, you know, the way that it's put together when he's telling his story and so on. And so I'll talk to Adam about that stuff, and then I'll be keeping it in the back of my head when I'm writing the script. But my scripts are very detailed. They're very prosy. And I learned this from the first artist I worked with. Sean mentioned earlier this Batman two-shot that I wrote that sort of kicked off my career in comics back in 2014. And I was partnered with J.P. Leone. J.P. Leone has very sadly, tragically died recently of cancer. He is a brilliant artist and also just a great dude. And he taught me a lot because I was very open with him at the beginning. I was like, this is my first gig in comics. I want to do the best job I can. Help me be a better comics writer. And he's like, the best thing you can do is not necessarily to tell me exactly how to write a panel. I mean, draw a panel. Don't think of it like an instruction manual for me. He's like, instead, make me feel the scene. Make me feel the horror. Make me feel the suspense. Make me feel in love with this character or disgusted by this character. Or he's like, so write every little panel sort of like you would a passage in a short story. And so, again, I'm a little bit maybe more prosy than a lot of other comics writers for that reason. But the idea is I want to sweep the artist away. Yeah. And a lot of people, I would say nobody except the artist and my editor sees what I write on the dialogue and the narrative captions.
Right.
But nonetheless, I'm making that effort to try to get them on board and make the story something that we're co-authoring.
Right. So you're literally, I mean, this is all new to me. So you're literally just painting the whole picture for each panel with your description and with like scene setting and everything like that.
While also telling the artist, you know, I trust your vision. You can see it better than I can. If you have an idea for expanding the number of panels, you know, compacting the number of panels, doing some crazy layout thing, whatever, rock on.
Yeah.
You have to have that flexibility. And also just constantly asking artists, what do you want to draw? And just keeping a list. Because I work with a lot of different artists. They all have their checklist, like, oh, I really want to draw Deadpool. Or, oh, I really want to draw, this is what Adam said to me recently, I would really like to draw Deadpool fighting Wolverine in space.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Like I said, that's so new to me. That's so not, you know, anything I know. So it's cool to see that. I think a lot of people might say, well, you write it and you're only writing those little teeny pieces of dialogue that are scattered, but you're painting everything, scene setting.
No, you know, when I first started off, I asked a bunch of comics writers and I asked a bunch of comics artists for their favorite scripts that they'd ever worked on. And I was curious about both points of view. And so I got a bunch of sample scripts from Scott Snyder, from Jeff Johns, from Dan Jurgens, and so on. And then I also got a bunch of artists who sent me, are you guys still there? You disappeared. Okay.
Over here. I took you full screen. Sorry about that. It was a little.
And I also, you know, looked at all these artists, like the scripts that they thought were the best they'd ever worked on. And there's no one way to write a comic script. Unlike screenplays, there's a strict way you have to write a screenplay. But comic scripts, it's all over the place. So I just sort of looked at what everybody else was doing and I found something that worked best for me. But a standard, you know, page might be like page 1, panel 1, you know, wide shot of an alleyway at night. Rain is falling hard at a diagonal slant. You know, maybe I specify what graffiti is sprayed sloppily on the brick wall. If there's some sort of symbol I want to nest there, like some villainous cabal is on the loose or whatever. Maybe there's a bunch of like humped, the black humps of trash bags flowing out of this dumpster, maybe a rat scurrying along. And then most importantly of all, you know, our focus is on a figure moving towards us from the back of that alley, maybe with a hood up, muscular build, whatever. And then I might have, you know, as a cap, I might say like cap Gotham City. And then I might have like a narrative caption to follow that, in which I, you know, say something like fall has come to Gotham or whatever. So, you know, I'm doing the combination of providing those dialogue balloons, providing those narrative captions, but that's just like the speck of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you love it?
I do love it. I mean, it's corny to say, but kind of a childhood dream come true to be writing Wolverine. Like that was always my guy. Like that's my focus was pretty narrow. Like I was an avid comics reader, but I only read. I'm not one of those people nerds who can be like, well, in the 1966 issue of Captain America, blah 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 blah. I read Wolverine. I read Punisher. I read Conan. I read Batman. You know, there were some side hustles with like Warlord and stuff like that, but like I was pretty specific in what I read. Like I can tell you all about everything Vertigo published.
Oh yeah, I love Lobo. Always read the Conans, but I also read the Robert E. Howard books. I went through all of those books.
Yeah, me too.
Definitely Batman's been one of my favorites. But I mean, this whole thing was supposed to be about Ghost Rider. This is the book that we have chose. But before we do that, I just wanted to find out what we're all drinking.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What are we drinking?
Yeah, Case, go for it. I saw you drinking something in a fancy
I got my
glass.
High West. You know, again.
Okay.
Nice.
Pretty lazy.
It blows me away that Utah makes such good bourbon.
I know this is
Double,
really good stuff.
What's that? Wait, show that again. That's a double rye.
That's the double rye.
Okay, double rye. All right.
And it is. I'm lazy, but because I know it's good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I don't drink this stuff a lot.
You
So
just
I'm
drinking
like,
that straight, or you put that?
yeah,
on
just straight.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
I got my little pub runner glass. It's not Lucas's art this time, which is sad, but
Yeah.
you know, got my pub runner glass, and I gotta keep it pretty mellow. I jump on a plane to
AWP.
AWP tomorrow. So
Oh, nice.
Oh
Nice.
yeah, nice.
mhm.
Philadelphia.
Yeah, I'm more excited. I'm pretty excited about Philadelphia.
I got a feeling this AWP might be a little wild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
3 years.
People have been holed up for a long time, and,
Yeah.
and I think everybody's going to be making out with everybody.
I love the end of the night dancing.
Yeah.
See all these writers dance is my favorite thing. But hey, I'm in there dancing too, so I don't care.
Hey,
All right.
one time I poked my head into the dance, and I was like, "Who is that old man?" I was like, "That's George Saunders." And George Saunders was going wild. That guy can bust a move.
Dude,
Nice.
and he writes stuff like 10th December.
Yeah.
So in honor of Ghost Rider, I
Devil's
bought
Cut. Wow.
the Jim Beam Devil's Cut, and it seems in the comic that's what he's been downing. It's like,
That's right.
Yeah.
and then I have a beer because I know you grew up in Deschutes County, right, Ben?
That's right. Yep.
So I got the it's a Deschutes IPA.
Fresh squeeze.
Deschutes Brewery, or as I like to call it, Descahooties. That's what I am drinking.
All right, Ben's on deck. All right, what do you got? Up to bat here.
So I'm going to show off something I'm not actually drinking right now.
No, that's okay. We do that a lot.
This just seemed fancier. So this is my buddy here in town. He's a total Scotch nerd, and he's got over 400 bottles. He calls it a library. That's how many bottles he has. And sometimes he hooks me up with deals when he's buying stuff at auctions, or sometimes he does like a smaller bottling for me. But I was over at his place, and he was giving me a bunch of rum. And I've never been a rum guy. It's too sweet for me. But he was doing like legit rums. And they had all these smoky flavors and sort of like a burnt banana quality, some of them really, really complex stuff. Anyways, a few weeks later, he's like, "Hey, I found this auction lot I'm going to buy some bottles from." And I said, "All right." I would normally say no to any rum, but you got me interested enough that I'm going to try it. And so it is a Grander Panama rum, and it is imbued with peat. So Isla peat.
Oh,
So it has that Scottish feel to it. Even though there's like a brown sweetness, it has that, cigar ash undertone to it that makes it really complex and delicious. And I'm a fan. But it's strong. It's, like 125 proof. So it's not something you want to guzzle at 7 p.m. as it is right now. We're going to be going to bed early.
Well, you had me at rum, Ben.
Yeah.
That is my favorite. Oh my God, I got to look for that stuff.
I like the smoky stuff, and I love that the Scotch. I like the inlays with the peat. So I have to try it if it's in my price range. I don't know.
I think
I wanted to show
I paid $50 for it.
Oh,
wanted
nice. Yeah.
Brandon, let me.
Yeah. Let me get.
Amazing art. Maybe I go this way now.
There we go.
So I want to tell you that it was sold out in Eugene, the nearest city for me.
Oh,
I went
really?
to 4 different comic book stores, completely sold out.
Yeah.
So I went to Corvallis, sold out. I was moving up to Astoria, so I tried Astoria and Seaside, sold out. I got this 2 days ago in Portland, Oregon, and I had to call to make sure that it was actually there. So you're doing pretty good, man.
Yeah.
I
My
drove
mom
about
has been busy.
400 miles for that comic book. That's what you know.
That's awesome.
So
Well, there's been some excitement for Ghost Rider.
Holy shit! They're trusting you with this, and I'm reading it. It starts with that question, Johnny, where have you been? My question to you is, can you give us a little bit of background, because he was missing, right? And at one point he was king of hell, and there's a lot of stuff going on with Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
But now we find him. So what happened before?
So it's been really about 2 years since Johnny Blaze has been on the scene. There are other Ghost Riders out there. one of them is currently on the Avengers, but Johnny Blaze is the original Ghost Rider. Yeah. And basically he made one small appearance in an issue about a year ago, but essentially it's been 2 years since he was last seen as the King of Hell. So my story starts off with, as you said, a panel where Johnny's looking rough, his eyes are black bagged, his posture's hunched over. He's got a big scar on the back of his head. He's talking to a therapist. And when she says, "Where have you been, Johnny?" she's talking about why hasn't he been checking in with his parole officer. But there's some meta commentary there where it's also referencing, like, where has he been in the Marvel Universe? Now, the answer to that is going to play out over the course of several issues, right? But in this kickoff issue, what you see is that Johnny Blaze is seemingly living his best life. He's living in a kind of white picket fence town. He has a beautiful wife, Roxanne, and his 2 kids. He's working with Crash at an auto shop, but he recently got into this accident and it's messed up his head. Not just physically, it's messed up his head mentally. And he's having all these nightmares, he's having all these visions, he's unable to ride his bike anymore. And, the general vibe of the series, I don't know if you've ever seen Blue Velvet, David Lynch's Blue Velvet, but the opening of that movie is something that I had in my head. In the opening of Blue Velvet, you hear the titular song, and you're sort of streaming down this beautiful suburban street, looks very 1950s, and there are all these houses tucked back on these green lawns, and there are rose bushes being trimmed, and people washing their cars and driveways, and
that little dog yipping.
Yeah, and it just seems perfect. And then you get closer and you get closer and you get closer, and in the grass of this perfectly manicured lawn, there's a severed ear with ants seething all over it. And that's kind of what I wanted to do here, where it's like, you offer up this dream, and then beneath the dream, there are shadows. There are dark things that are crouched. Mm-hmm. And so slowly, this world begins to come apart. And Johnny doesn't know who has trapped him here in this fishbowl environment. But
he doesn't know he's trapped at first.
He doesn't know he's trapped at first. But over the course of the story, he is unchained in a way. And he merges once again with the spirits of vengeance and heads the hell out of town. And over the course of this first arc, he's essentially going to be a wandering Ronin in a way, kind of like an outlaw character, or you can think of it in a frontier Western sort of way, like going from place to place and sort of searching for answers and getting into mischief, and dealing with different hauntings, monsters, etc., while seeking out this larger mystery as to how he ended up in this situation. So I wanted to get back to basics. The Ghost Rider mythology, it's really interesting, but it's also very complicated. And, it's one thing if you've got, if you're a Marvel nerd and the entire Wikipedia entry on everything, you get excited about that stuff. But you know what? Most people don't know about all these different Ghost Riders and these demons and the hierarchy and blah, 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 blah. Like that stuff, that's exclusionary if you try to write a series that carries all of that baggage with it. And so given that this was not just a #1 issue, but also the 50th anniversary, I want to go back to basics, sort of start over and not disregard or erase any of that stuff, but just start from some sort of platform where whether you were a longtime Ghost Rider reader or whether you were picking it up for the very first time, you'd still. So it's kind of like a few years ago, when I was at DC, I was involved in this big event called Rebirth. And so for and for Teen Titans, and those are the series I was in charge of. But for all the series, Batman and Wonder Woman and everything else, everything had a reboot. Everything went back to a #1 issue. And the idea behind it was to take the core characteristics of these legacy characters try to celebrate that, try to, really get back to sort of like the essence of what made people fall in love with these characters to begin with. Having been part of that rebirth experience, I sort of applied the same lens to Ghost Rider. This is in a way like Ghost Rider Rebirth.
Yeah. So that was my next question. I'm sure Case has some questions, but I want to, like, you have all of that, that fan base. You have these beloved characters that have been there for a half a century. I mean, how do you deal with the pressure of just not messing this shit up?
I mean, that's something you hear about every day on Twitter, believe me. I'm very grateful for the mute and block button for that reason.
Well, at least you get feedback.
Are we allowed to swear on the show?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
we are
Tia's
drinking
not
beer.
here, so we're minus about 50 fucks already.
I was jokingly showing my family earlier a few tweets that came in where it said, "Fuck you, Benjamin Percy." And that's
Oh my God, really?
Wow, it's personal.
What? What?
And then there's, the occasional death threat that rolls in. But I'm always like, what are you going to do? Stab me with your plastic?
Don't mess with someone's comics, though. Holy shit, they're really into it. And this backs up Sean's question, because I was curious, when you're writing on the creativity side. I'm Brandon, by the way, producer of the show. Hi, Ben. On the creativity side, I don't know much about comics. I've never been a reader of them, but are there rules in the comic? Can you be creative? Can you break with tradition at times? And how much do you step out of the box as far as that goes? Or do you have to stick within a certain style and format when you're not just the history of the character, but in the writing of the comic itself?
That's a central question. At DC, things were a little more strict, I have to say. There were parameters. There's a little bit more micromanagement. I had a great experience there. At the same time, I mean, they gave me my start. I'll forever be grateful for that. But let's say you're writing Teen Titans, as I was. There's always this question of continuity. So it's not just about the characters as they have existed for years, sometimes for decades. It's also considering the web of other stories that are being told, because you're writing a shared universe, right? So if you're writing Teen Titans, I've got Kid Flash, I've got Aqualad, I've got Damian Wayne, aka Robin.
Yeah.
In addition to Starfire and Raven. But the first characters that I mentioned there, they're all in other series. They're all impacted by other series. So I have to know what's going on in Aquaman. I have to know what's going on in Batman. I have to know what's going on in
you get briefings?
Flash, and it's just it would drive me crazy. Honestly, crazy.
Does somebody call you up and all right, this is what's going on here? Or exactly. No, you just have to read it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You got the Bat phone and then the Flash phone, Aquaman phone. But the thing that would drive me crazy is that something would always change at the last minute. It's like, Aqualad now has one eyeball because it got stabbed out by, a trident in Aquaman or something.
But doesn't the metaverse get rid of all that shit now? You got the metaverse.
But the experience at Marvel's been a little different, in part because here I am writing Ghost Rider, who's sort of off on his own 40 acres. Or with Wolverine and with X-Force, I've been part of this thing called the Dawn of X, right? And the X-Men essentially rebooted 2 years ago. And we, there was a lot of thought that went into this. One of which is, one of the central tenets of it is rather political. If you think about the X-Men being characters who are oftentimes associated with marginalized groups. If you look at what's happening in this country with the Me Too movement, with Black Lives Matters, right? A lot of people have stood up recently and said that's enough. And so with the X-Men in the past have almost always been in peril, victimized, chased down, hunted. What we had the X-Men do, and this was helmed by Jonathan Hickman, is say that's enough. And so what they did was they formed their own island nation of Krakoa. And not only that, but this island of Krakoa
is a mutant.
X-Men history, that's like a living entity. Yeah. And Krakoa it's a mutant itself, and it's able to produce botanicals that are medicinal and can not necessarily cure cancer, but pretty close. It can cure dementia. Anyways, they would offer to the world these medicines if everybody recognized Krakoa as a sovereign nation. And so you have this island, and basically the mutants annexed themselves from the rest of society and became dominant economically and politically. And so we have, for 2 years almost, been off on our own. And so basically we've been able to do our own thing. We don't have to worry about the Avengers. We don't have to worry about what's going on with Spider-Man, because we've got our own.
Kind of help make like a mutant CIA, a mutant FBI type of things, right? With X-Force and
X-Force. That's one of the series I write, and when we were doing this, I was like, well, if you have a nation, you need a CIA, and so X-Force is like, it's always had a black ops vibe throughout the years, but it's the CIA of the mutant kingdom. So that's a lot of fun to write.
Oh, the Deaths and Lives of Wolverine. I just picked those up. That seems like a lot of fun. You get to revisit all of the stuff that Wolverine had ever did, right? And how he has died. And that seems like a blast.
And in a way, that cycles back to Brandon's question about legacy, so here I am writing Wolverine, right? He's almost 50 years old as a character when he first appeared in Incredible Hulk. And so, I've read I probably haven't read every single Wolverine issue. I've read a lot of them. So I already had that sort of in my DNA. But one of the things about Wolverine that I wanted to address is that he's had all of these different lives, right? There's like the famous storylines in Japan, the famous storylines in Madripoor, the famous storylines in Chester Mansion. Yeah. Stories where he was part of Weapon X and Team X and so on. And so the stories when he was, his origin story in Canada. So what I wanted to do from the very beginning, you can see this in page 1 of my Wolverine run, page 1 of issue 1. I have a line that goes something like this. It's like, James, Wolverine, Patch, Weapon X. I go through all of those different identities. And then I talk about Krakoa, Westchester, Madripoor, Canada. I go through this sort of table of contents of his broken life. And I talk about how he can't puzzle piece it all together because he's been mind wiped and memory planted so many times. He's not sure what's true and what's invented. And so I wanted to, from the beginning, address this. I wanted to write this big event. So 10 Lives of Wolverine and the 10 Deaths of Wolverine, which is out right now, I've been working towards this moment since I started 2 years ago. It's all been building towards this. And it's something that is addressing the past, time travel story, but it's also, synthesizing his future as well. Because, there's like a Terminator thing, Wolverine that comes from the future back in time. And it's pretty wild.
Well, selfishly, I want you to revisit the Sam Keith Wolverine run and put Cyber in there because he was like one of my favorite characters. He was completely crazy, didn't really have anything to do about computers, had adamantium skin. You remember Cyber?
Yeah, there's been a lot.
Sam Keith was just amazing.
People love Cyber. There's a lot of, you might as well join the chorus of Nerds Online and tag me.
Where's Cyber? Where's Cyber? There's someone saying, fuck you, Sean Davis.
I just really like
I'm not big enough to be cursed at.
I feel like half of the tweets I get are, really enjoyed the issue. Where's Cyber?
Really?
Well, it's not Cyber. It could be anybody. Everybody has their favorite character.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Well, could you ever just, write a full comic off just the Twitter comments? It's like, all right, here's what you wanted.
Let me pause and say, like, the great thing about comics fans is they care. They
100%.
I'm making some jokes, but they care, and that passion is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well,
every time you go to a bookstore reading, And everybody, they're like, oh yeah, sure, very interesting. Oh, and like soft applause at the end, and drinking their Earl Grey tea. And then you go to like a comics event, it's like there's 4,000 people in there, and you're like on the stage, and there's like it's like being at a wrestling event or something.
Oh, they're passionate.
Going all around, and you're up there, and you're like, and then Wolverine is gonna kick some ass, and everybody's like, yes, having seizures in the aisles and dressed up as the character.
Wouldn't that be cool if we could do that to like Victorian literature? And like, then Heathcliff is gonna come in and kick some ass.
Do that at AWP, Case.
Yeah. I'm just planning on running and eating. That's all I'm gonna do.
Running and eating.
But you created some characters here, and maybe I'm wrong, but I try to look it up. But like Talia Warroad, a beautiful name. She seems like she's going on a path. And that guy Zeb, are we done with Zeb, or is Zeb coming back? Because
coming back, yeah.
That guy was hilarious, man. Like he had like filed teeth to points, a blonde mullet. I don't know if he had a pencil thin mustache, but it was also a handlebar pencil thin mustache. And
a Ron Perlman vibe for that guy.
Oh, yeah.
And you had me at blonde mullet. It's fantastic.
That was awesome.
And he's a part of this group called the Night Magicians, this Night Council, and yeah, you're going to hear more from him. Talia Warroad, she's the head of this new unit. She used to be a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. Her unit got swept aside, so the FBI took the funding and took, at the recommendation of Nick Fury, started up kind of an X-Files unit, and Talia Warroad is the head of that. And so all the supernatural activity, as she says in the first issue, is on the rise in the country.
Nobody else wants to believe her. Nobody wants to believe her. Nobody wants to listen to her, but she's like, I need some fucking money. Let's do this.
And she, the next issue reveals she drives around in a hearse with flames on it.
I'm sorry, Case. I'm stealing all your questions, man.
But when we were talking about
one of the Twitter nerds that loves comic books, so I've been asking them all.
Well, Case officially went off script with the first question, so he can't. I mean, he just ruined the whole.
Case has gone rogue.
Yeah, he's rogue. Now I just want to show
the outline was just a guideline, man.
Guideline. But this the lighting on Case right now is fantastic. I love the lighting on Case. This is where it's at. Yeah, so that's
it's like Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
Where's your little circle hoop thing that you usually use? Man?
Oh, I need that for my TikToks.
You don't. Hey, I didn't get a chance to talk about what I was drinking, but so I just wanted to throw this stout edition of Jameson. Just it's March. It's March.
How is it? So this Devil's Cut is pretty smooth. It's only 90% or 90 proof. It's a decent, but I'm one of those wimps that I love to put my bourbon on ice with a little bit of water.
Yeah, I like ice.
People hate that.
I don't
get
like
all
water.
the time on Twitter on how that's wrong.
Again with the Twitter feedback.
5 or 6 people on my Twitter following.
You're listening too much to him, Sean. Yeah.
I'm listening too much to him. I am, Brandon. Right.
All right, Sean, Case, we got about 10 minutes left with Ben. We don't want to take up.
I only have one question, kind of a thing question, but Case, you go first, buddy.
Well, no, I mean, I think I like the idea of like this Ghost Rider just came out. Obviously, you're working on a larger series with that, but what are we going to see next? What's going to be the next thing that actually lands into the world? Which is given birth?
I've got a few things rolling right now in Hollywood, and I'm putting a lot of energy into that. So I'm writing Urban Cowboy with my buddy James Ponsel. James is a director. You might know his stuff like The End of the Tour. That's my favorite film of his. It's about David Foster Wallace. It stars Jason Segel and Jesse Eisenberg. He made The Spectacular Now. He's made a lot of stuff. And anyways, we became pals a long time ago in 2003. We were roommates at the Swanee Writers Conference. And we just have stayed fast friends ever since, and we've been collaborating. So we are adapting Urban Cowboy, the 1980 John Travolta movie, Dipper Winger movie into a TV series for Paramount Plus. So that's been a really fun challenge, and hopefully it goes the distance. And then I'm also adapting The Ninth Metal. That's one of my novels that kicks off the comet cycle. I'm adapting that right now for Sony. So whether either of those goes the distance, I don't know, but that's where I'm putting a lot of my whiskey and venom right now.
Hey, Ben, just to clarify, go the distance means like it will be shown eventually on TV somewhere, correct?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, because so much gets cut. Like you do so much work, and then somebody doesn't pick it up, or somebody says, "Yeah, not going to make it." Okay.
Hollywood makes a lot of investments, and so a lot of it doesn't. Most of it doesn't pan out.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give you an example of this, and things have changed since COVID. But let's say pre-COVID, a place like NBC, CBS, a network, they might buy, these aren't exact numbers, but it gives you an idea of the ratio. Let's say they'd buy 20 pilots every quarter.
Wow.
And so what that means is they heard a bunch of pitches and they're like, yeah, I like that. I want you to write a pilot. And so they pay somebody to write this pilot. Okay. So then this is every quarter. So every season, let's say. So it's spring. You've got 20 pilots in the works. You look at all these pilots when they're done and you're like, I like these 7. And so out of these 7, you then shoot the pilot for each of them. Okay. So each of those pilots is probably going to be $3 to $5 million.
Wow. That's some investment.
When you shoot it, just like a movie, an hour-long pilot. And then out of those 6 or 7 that they shot, they're probably only going to put on the air 4 of them or 3 of them. And most of those shows will only last 1 season, right?
Yeah.
So there's just this, and that's just one example.
They get picked up for this season,
Yeah. No, I was an extra in a pilot for. It actually was shown after the Super Bowl. It was billed as Baywatch on the snow, like in the mountains. Weird, it didn't work. So they
don't have bikinis up there in Ogden.
I don't. Well, it was filmed in the mountains in Salt Lake, and there were some famous-ish people in it, I guess. But I was just an extra cat, and they showed it after the Super Bowl, thinking this is going to be the next big hit, along with Baywatch. And yeah, weird, it didn't catch. But they do. I didn't realize they spent that much money, Ben. That's a lot, or did that many? That's so much
just
work.
One example you hear all the time about. Oh, my story got optioned, my novel got optioned, whatever. Well, they option all this stuff, and then probably 99.9% of those, nothing ever happens.
Oh, it's crazy.
All that means is they're just buying the right to make it.
Yeah.
And then out of the stuff, they're like, oh, I think we might try to write a script on this. Script gets written, or maybe 3 scripts get written, or maybe 10 scripts get written, and a lot of money gets spent, and it never gets shot.
Yeah, good news, bad news is there's even more people vying for those storylines. In other words, Netflix and Peacock and Disney. I mean, everybody's trying to produce Apple even. I mean, everyone's trying to produce content. So I'm wondering how much of it gets dumped from one and picked up by another.
Sometimes that happens with failed seasons, like The Expanse. It got picked up from.
Expanse was amazing.
That's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
But it started off as
I've read all the books. So
sci-fi and went over to Amazon.
Yeah.
Amazon, Hulu.
I think they did a great job with it. And there's something where you can, like, you're watching a series for 4 seasons and they finally say fuck. You're like, all right, awesome. That's so cool.
That's when it went to Amazon.
And Case, your question was so much better than mine. My question was, hey, Ben, when are you going to write Greatest American Hero? Because that's probably my favorite, and it really needs to be rewritten.
I still do that on the swing sets, by the way.
No, my last question was about, like, you have all of these big-time directors talking about Marvel movies, like Denis Villeneuve. I love Dune for sure, but he says that Marvel movies turn us into a zombie a bit. Martin Scorsese said they're not cinema. Coppola said they're despicable, even though his nephew played Ghost Rider. But meanwhile, Spider-Man No Way Home breaks all the records. Batman just hit $500 million in ticket sales. And then, Jared Leto is saying that Marvel has saved movie theaters. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's always complaining about what's popular. People complained about the Western when it was the dominant genre.
Okay, so let me add a little bit to that. So you're a novel writer. You're in a literary field, and then you go to comics. Do people are like, oh, he's just a fiction writer now, or he's a genre writer now?
Yeah. I remember I did an event at a college a few years ago, and one of the faculty members wouldn't come to my event because they called me a hack and a sellout.
So. You sold out to do comic books, which are what's going on today.
I won't name another faculty member who I taught with at Tin House.
It was Mike Magnuson. It was Mike Magnuson, wasn't it?
No, well, Mike Magnuson. This guy did sit me down. We were having, just dinner in the cafeteria, and he's like, I want to ask you something. Like, don't you feel like you're wasting your talent writing these comic books? He's like, why are you doing this?
That says a lot about you and not much about me. Yeah.
Like, have you ever read a comic?
Yeah.
Anyways, I get a lot of that, but I don't know. I just feel pretty disconnected to, like, there was a part of my life where I was always at MLA and AWP, and I was teaching on college campuses and everything else, and I was tuned in, all that stuff, but I'm totally separate from it now. So
well, I want to say, and this will be the last thing I say, and I really appreciate, man, because when I went for the MFA, and I really felt like everybody was moving me towards I had to go literary, but my heart's always been comic books and like genre, sci-fi and stuff. And when you kind of broke out and did all the stuff that you did, that's why I've been following you so much, because like we don't have to do that, right? We can actually do what the fuck we want to do.
If you love Lydia Davis and Donald Barthelme, great. I mean, I love them too. I love literary fiction, but my heart is in the nerdy stuff. And
I love it. No,
that's what made me want to be a writer, is because I grew up obsessed with dragons and vampires and barbarians with woolly underpants.
I'll tell you, man, Robert E. Howard saved my life. Robert E. Howard saved my life. And thank you for keep going in what you're doing. I am so excited to see what you do. I have no doubt that you're going to get picked up on some streaming platform or some big movie distributor and do some great things. Because right now, like, the X-Men is coming back into the MCU, and they're going to be looking for storylines. I can't wait until it's like the lives and deaths of Wolverine or something like that.
I would die a happy man if that happened.
Yeah.
I just hope they pay their writers and their artists better. And I'm really sorry we didn't get to talk about your artists, because I know, and the letterers and inkers, because they do such an amazing job.
Yeah, that's the thing about comics, is that it's a collaboration, and that's a great thing. I talked about it before as a co-authorship, but it's more than just the artist. It's the letterer, it's the colorist, it's the editors. It's a team effort. And if you're all strenuously trying to tell the best story possible, that's exciting and inspiring, and it's something you don't get when you're writing novels and you're just alone in the dark playing with your imaginary friends all by yourself. I'm glad that I have that in my life, but I'm also glad I have the comics and the TV stuff, because company is a good thing. Interacting with other people is a good thing. Makes me feel a little bit less alone. I live in the woods. I'm in my basement all day. Like, it's great to be able to get on the phone and get on Zoom with people and just talk story, break story.
Yeah.
Case, any last questions?
Thank you so much for being here, man.
No, just thanks. It's great to see you, Ben.
Great to see you guys.
This is fun.
Share a whiskey in person in the near future.
Hopefully soon.
Well, I may live in Astoria if you ever want to come to the Pacific thing again in January.
Goonies never say die.
Goonies never. I saw that comment and I thought, okay, all right, we're on the same page here. Yeah, Astoria. Yeah. Very good. Ben, thank you so much for being generous with your time here today. This has been Bourbon, Beer, and Books. If you are listening to this podcast only through the podcast, well, guess what? You can see our beautiful faces on YouTube. If you jump on over to the Banyan Collective on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, and that helps us out a lot. So thanks so much. Ben, I appreciate it, man. That's very nice of you to spend some time with us, and I learned a few things, so that was awesome. Sean, Case, thanks so much. Case entering studio, he has as his. Very good. Thanks for listening, and we will all drink together again next month. So we'll see you then. Cheers, everyone.
All right. See ya.
See ya.